Bruce Roundpoint. My Mohawk name is Tohosanate, which means bright name. May 3rd, 52. I played, I very seldom gave up. I played with my heart. I was a very tough player. I was not the biggest player, but I was very tough, and very seldom I lost a fight, if any, in a lacrosse game. And back then, lacrosse players played two ways, up and down. When you don't have the ball, you're on defense. When you have the ball, you're on offense. And I got a lot of goals, and then I stopped a lot of goals. I was, you know, it's when you lose the ball, you don't run off. You make sure that you defend it, and then when your team gets the ball back, then you get off. That was the way we played. Well, my grandfather, he was a hard-working man. He would get up and go to work at 7 o'clock every morning. He would put in at least 2 hours before he had breakfast, and then he had a quick breakfast and went back, and he made the lacrosse sticks and supervised all the people in the factory. And at its peak, the lacrosse factory probably hired 100 people. That included the stick netters, which were mostly women at the time, and he had a guy that would deliver all the unstrung sticks to all the homes, and they would do all the sticks at homes. And when they were done, the same guy would go along and pick everything up and redistribute more sticks. And if he wasn't walking around just checking on anything, I always remember him being at the bandsaw cutting up the sticks to be ready to be bent. He was always doing something, but most of the time he would be working the bandsaw. And my father, when he wasn't working on steel for ironworking, he would be in the factory also, doing basically anything that he had to do. My father and his two brothers all worked for the lacrosse factory. And Wally, I think, was the best stick carver that was ever around. Like, even a few years before he passed away, he was still carving sticks for Mark Mitchell on East End. And no matter where I go, if I see a stick that came from the island, I look at it and I could tell if Wally carved it, because he had a signature that not too many knew. When he carved a stick, that was Wally's. And I was one of the ones that knew his signature, and I would always look and see. I said, this is one of Wally's, because of the way he carved this section here and this section there. When they got shipped to the States, most of the time, I'm pretty sure it was under the Bacharach Raisin label, which they put the labels on for them, and all I knew is they were in Towson, Maryland. That's where he would ship them, and whenever my grandfather would ship, he would make the crates. He would make roughly like a 7-foot by 4-foot by maybe a 6-foot pine crate, and he would fill these boxes with the sticks that got shipped to Maryland. Back then, I mean, it was an old factory, but it was a good enough sized building. It probably, I don't know, I'm going to say 3,000 or 4,000 square feet. And over the years, there's nothing but sawdust everywhere. And just a bad electrical contact someplace, I guess. And once sawdust ignites, it just basically explodes. And we couldn't save anything inside the building because I lived right next door. I was only 15 then. And when everybody showed up, a lot of the sticks were piled up next to the building as it was burning. We got as much of it away so that we could save some of the the sticks that, could be finished later on, and it's a good thing we did, because in a week we were producing sticks again, but here and there, just a lot of it was, take it, build it here, take it there, but we stayed in business. And I'm pretty sure, like, my grandfather died late June of that year, but nobody ever told him that the factory burnt down. Well, he died at 67, so I don't know when he started. He might have been in the 30s or something like that. But all his life he made sticks. I played for mostly Cornwall Island teams, and then when we got into the midget age, it was always a combined St. Regis team. Then from there, the St. Regis Braves. And I went my junior career with St. Regis Braves, and then I went from there to play for Jim Bishop, Montreal Quebecois, in 1975. Pure hell. I'd never played for such an intense coach, and he wasn't mean, but he was so disciplined and strict that he caught me off guard, because I didn't realize that that's the way the coaches in the pro leagues or in the senior A leagues coach. They want discipline on their teams, and they don't want no lollygaggers. I mean, if you're gonna lollygag, you don't last long. And in Montreal, I see guys come and go that would probably be starters on any senior A team, and because they couldn't take Jim Bishop. And actually, after a while, I might have played maybe a month into the program, and I couldn't take him anymore, and I quit. I just up and quit and went back to Steel. And then I think I don't know how long I was off, maybe 3 weeks at the most, and then my buddy Ernie and I played together since Pee-wees all the way up to senior, pro, and senior, and he says they want to know if you want to come back. So I decided, yeah, I'll go back, and then I basically knuckled down, and I stuck with the program, and I took his whatever he gave me, and I says, I'm going to do it, and I did. I stuck it out, and 1 week I was player of the week, which didn't surprise me, but I was so proud of what I accomplished. It was within, I think, 2 weeks of coming back, and then I was player of the week, and then we went into the playoffs, and before the playoffs, Jim Bishop took us to Mount Gabriel. That's where we had our, we had maybe a week before the playoffs started, and then he took us up there to train up there, run up and down the mountains, have dinner every night with the team, and just kind of bring us together as a team. But still, we practiced in the parking lot. We ran up and down the hills, which was, it was grueling, but we had to do it. And we played Boston, and I think we went the full seven games with Boston, but we beat them. But in the process, we lost our best goalie, which was Ernie back then. I played with him since we first learned how to pick up a stick. And in fact, I've never played against him in my life. We were always teammates. My father played, my uncles played, and my grandfather always took me to the games. So, and in between periods, if there was a kid in the stand and between the periods, he was on the floor throwing the ball around, playing. So that's how I got into it. Just by watching the big boys play. He showed me things that I hadn't seen before that. I didn't know what discipline was until I played for Jim, and I respect him, and we became good friends. And when he was in the area, he would come by and come visit me at my house, and I went to his funeral. I mean, we became such good friends, and I had nothing but respect for him because of what he accomplished. When I first seen him, he came to Cornwall and brought his Oshawa Green Gales here to play against an all-star team before I was a junior, and I watched, and it was just awesome the way he coaches his teams. And then I coached the junior B team here, and then he brought his midget team and basically kicked our ass here. With a midget team, he kicked our juniors, and but only for 2 periods. But after 2 periods, he was so far ahead. But the 3rd period, we won, and I was proud of that. And he actually was proud of what we did in the 3rd period. But his game is so different than what we played around here. It's almost like playing against the Harlem Globetrotters in basketball. You don't know what the hell to expect. Well, I quit playing in 1993 after we won the silver in I think it was Kelowna, BC, but we won the Masters in '92 in Vernon, and then I think the '93 is when I actually quit playing and never played after that. It was time. I was 41. It already had taken its toll because we've always ran on concrete, and concrete is hard on your body. And then when I played the pro in Montreal, we played in the Forum, which was a wooden floor, and the Water Street Arena was a wooden floor. They were almost similar, but it was a lot better than playing on concrete. And then the worst to play on is at AstroTurf, because there is no give to that. I mean, more players injured themselves with sprained ankles and all that because there's no give, there's no slide. It's just you try to stop, and you just don't slide. You just turn an ankle. When we played Quebec City at a Quebec Caribou in the finals in the Pro League, we had 14,500 people in the Quebec Coliseum. I think that was one of the highlights because I never dreamed about, playing to that many people. I mean, you walk into Cornwall, there's 50,000 people, but you don't see 14,000 of them standing on one corner. So it's it was awe-inspiring, and I didn't realize that the French people liked lacrosse so much, and they did. And then the next moment was in Boston during the playoffs. We would get our names called out, and when they called my name out to go on the floor, I heard probably, I don't know how many thousands of people boo me. And I says, you know what, I've arrived. When the fans from another team boo you, then you know you're doing something right. But we had some bad games back then. We had bench clearing brawls. We had fans on the floor fighting other fans. And when you go to a game and you got a dozen police officers in the building, it's going to be a rough game. I coached the junior B team, and then I coached the senior A team. I coached the Thunder to the finals in the what do you call it, senior A league here. And if we would have beat Brampton, we would have went on to the Man Cup. But like everything else in lacrosse, when you lose key players to injuries, you're just not there. We lost our top defenseman. We lost some of our offense through injuries, and we couldn't compete against Brampton after that. But we went 7 games with Peterborough. We were down 3-0, and we ended up winning 4 straight. And I'm not sure, but I think every game that was won is that the team that got to the number 10 first always won. I'm not sure, but I remember that. But I took over coaching. I would say midstream, and when I first started, I won the first 5 games, lost 1. Then I won the next 5 games. It seemed like I would go in spurts of 5 games, win 5 in a row, then lose, 5 in a row and lose. And then we actually, ended up in the playoffs and almost to the Man Cup. That was in the late 90s. And I mean, I had John Tavares playing for me. I had Mikey Benedict, I had Owen Bennett. I had good players. I had excellent play. Well, John, he's probably considered the best lacrosse player right now, or was. He's retired now. Lacrosse is funny. It just comes and then it just slowly fades away. It's so expensive, like we're the most eastern team in the senior A loop, and everywhere we went was always an overnight trip. Like Peterborough was the closest we had, but you still had to either stay overnight or finish at midnight and drive back, and you're home at 3 in the morning. So, and then from there, your Six Nations is the farthest, and it became an expense issue. Not everybody wants to fund a team that has to stay in a hotel, and you got to feed these players all the time. I mean, it was a good team, but just I think the finances ran out. The best player I played against was Jimmy J.J. Johnson from Peterborough. To me, I think he was one of the best players back then in the 70s. And another player, John Grant Sr. Yeah, whenever he wound up, you either know it's going to hit the post or go in. And other than that, I mean, there were so many. It's hard to figure out who. Travis Cook was another one. I played against him. He actually ended up beating us, and he went to Quebec City from Syracuse. He started out with the Stingers, and then the Stingers moved to Quebec, but they changed it to the Caribou. And the one thing that always impressed me is that the 2 final teams, Quebec and Montreal Quebecois, had all the natives on both teams. Like we had I think 3 or 4 on our team, and then the Caribou had the same amount, 3 or 4. And I always thought that was so neat to be playing off against each other. Yeah, Johnny Davis. Well, I played with him in Montreal. We used to call him the shooter. Well, they call him the shooter. And then I asked one guy someday, why do they call him the shooter? I said, look at his stats. He's the top scorer in the league, but he takes the most shots, and he's got the worst percentage. so I guess the more you shoot, the more chances you got to score. But he was a good player. He was a good player. You couldn't take the ball away from him if you tried. I mean, he was like He was like Gumby. He was like made out of rubber. Like you couldn't knock him off his feet, and he was just a good player. And probably the next best guy that I played with, I'm not going to say the next best. The best was Ernie Mitchell. He was always our goalie, and without him, I don't think I would have got as far because we helped each other. I knew how he played, and he knew how I played, and whenever he had the ball, I knew exactly where to run, and that ball would be there. Or if I if he what do you call it? If he made a save, he would always go to his special guys. He would pick one of the defensemen, shoot, and they would, shoot up to the crease or something. And more often than not, we ended up with a goal just by Ernie starting it off. But he had the best seat in the house. He was always looking up the floor and seeing what's going on. When you're playing, you're never always just looking in one direction. You're all over the place. But Ernie always had the best spot in the house. He could see what's developing, and he wasn't quiet. He was always yelling what to do, where to go, and I thank him. He was a coach when I played in Montreal. He was. I'm not sure who we coached for, but it might have been Maryland. It might have been what do you call it, Philadelphia. But he was coaching against Jim Bishop. Same with Morley Kells. Morley, I don't pay too much attention to the opposite team coaches because I don't play against them. I play against the players. But even though they call the shots, they're the generals. But still. I think the future is going to be good. Like I noticed that at least the pro leagues now, you can see their names in the papers and where they're playing, who they won, and stuff like. Before that, it was strictly a summer game, and I think and Jim Bishop always said if lacrosse was played in the wintertime, it would be as big as hockey. And he said, who wants to sit in an arena in the summertime to watch lacrosse? That was always his point of view. But I think lacrosse is a sport that'll never die. It'll go up and it'll come back down, up, come back down. So it's like lob ball, softball. Some summers you can't get enough teams, and then some summers you got way too many players that want to play, It's like a trend, but lacrosse, I think it's here to stay. And the only thing I don't like about the system now is the offense and the defense. I don't like that because I think to me it makes for a boring game, especially if you're playing. And I think it makes for a boring game if you're watching because you never see the defense on the floor long enough to know who's a good defenseman. The minute they get the ball, and then they pass it off to the offensive team, and then and the guys that play, you get bored. Like when I coach, we had the offense and the defense, but I would switch players around, and I had two power plays. One was my scoring power play, and one was another power play that I made up with players that some were defensive, some were just good ball handlers, and I made up another power just so that they had a chance to feel the ball and get a goal, because that's you can't just be a defenseman in lacrosse. And Pete Burns told me, he says, when you don't have the ball, you're a defenseman. When you have the ball, you're an offense. So that's the way it is. I was a contractor. Well, when I first started out playing juniors, 1970, I became an iron worker, and I went to New York City, and I lost. Well, I didn't lose. I mean, probably half the season I lost the games because when I went away to work, I would only play on the weekends, and if we had a Saturday game, I played, or sometimes a Sunday afternoon game, but then 10 o'clock at night, you're back on the road to go back to work. And from there, I became a contractor, and then I stayed home, and then I played more lacrosse. I used to think Jim was always mad at you, or because he's yelling at you all the time. And then I begin to notice that some players he doesn't yell at, but he's always yelling at me and a lot of the other players. And then I noticed the other players he's not yelling at are not there anymore. Then after I figured, well, you know what? I really don't care, because when I went to ironwork, there was more yelling there than in any lacrosse game, because that was, I think as a native, if you don't get yelled at, you don't listen. Right now, there are too many people that, without a better word than say, they're crybabies, you know? They can't take a little bit of criticism, but you know, sports is different. I mean, I would never want a teacher yelling at a student or anything like that, but in sports, yeah, you got to learn to take it, because he wants to get the best out of you. And if it takes a little bit of yelling, and if you can stick it out, you will be the best. I mean, when I coached John Tavares, sometimes I had to yell at him. I yelled at all my players, and I told them why. And John listened, and then and we became good friends. But it's basically discipline. He was not a well-liked coach. I didn't say, well, not, but he had respect. He had the respect, and probably the best day for me and the saddest day for me was with playing for Jim when he let Gaylord Paulus go, because Gaylord Paulus was on our team. And when he let Gaylord Paulus go, because of, well, him and Jim didn't get along, even though they played, he played for him in the Oshawa Green Gales. And Gaylord had to leave, and to me, Gaylord was the best player in the world at one time. And when he got let go, it was so sad, because that was one of the highlights for me, is being on the same team as Gaylord Paulus. And then the best part of it is when I took his spot and became a regular in the lineup. And that was in the playoffs with Boston. Just before we even started the playoffs with Boston is when Gaylord got let go, and then I took his spot, and I became a regular and I had a regular shift. So I always felt guilty that I took his spot, but hey, I was a right shot, he was a right shot, and I took the best of it. If it wasn't for our two goalies getting injured, we would have been the champs, because Caribou never beat us in the regular season. But in the playoffs they did, because both our goalies were injured. Ernie, I can't say he couldn't see the ball. He's seen 3 or 4 of them all the time. So you can't stop a ball when there's that many coming at you all the time. And then the other guy broke his hand, and then we ended up with a goalie from Maryland. I mean, he tried his best, but they weren't Dave Evans, and they weren't Ernie Mitchell. It's a funny thing. It's when I quit playing, I lost interest in the game, because I don't know if I lost interest in the game, but maybe it's because of the fact that I couldn't play anymore, and even after coaching, I didn't mind the coaching, but I always longed to be back on the floor to play. And then after I quit coaching, and then I just decided, you know, I had no more interest in the game. And my uncle was the same way, my father was the same way, and a lot of people I think are in the same way. It was hard because you had to relive what you were doing, and then now you're just watching the game, and it's like, oh, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. You know, it's a different style now, but it always boils down to are you in shape? You know, the lacrosse is not a place for a guy that doesn't want to get himself in shape. Not competitively, anyways. It's a tough sport. I would say it's tougher than hockey. You know, hockey, yeah, you want to take a break, you glide. When you glide in lacrosse, you fall over.